Yes, I know my channel is called Greece Explained and Istanbul is not in Greece, but first of all, it's only 1 hour away by plane from Athens, so it's really close. And secondly, many cruise ships that go around Greece also stop in Turkey, and so many of you have been asking me to make this video. All right, let's start with the basics. Turkey is located here to the east of Greece, and Istanbul is here in northwestern Turkey, very close to Greece. Let's zoom in on Istanbul now. The city is split in two by the so-called Bosphorus Strait, which connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Black Sea. And the Bosphorus Strait is also the natural border between Europe and Asia. So Istanbul is actually built on two different continents, which is pretty cool. Now, Istanbul is an absolutely gigantic city with approximately 20 million people living there. But the part you're interested in is this tiny section, which is the city center. There's actually two city centers, the old one and the new one. The old town is also known as the Golden Horn. That's where the city was founded by the Greeks in the 7th century BC, and it was called Byzantium back then. And that's where nearly all of Istanbul's famous landmarks are located, like the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque, for instance. The new city center, on the other hand, is a much more modern part of the city, with most buildings built in the last 100 years only. And the cruise port, by the way, is located there in the new town, but more on that later. So the old city center is definitely more about the landmarks, while the new city center is more about food, shopping, nightlife, and so on. All right, now before we start talking about what to do and see in Istanbul, let me share some general information first. Turkey's official name has changed in 2022 and it's now called Türkiye. Not that you really care, but if I hadn't mentioned it in this video, I would have half of Turkey in the comments shouting at me. So it's Türkiye, not Turkey. Now, the currency in Türkiye is the Turkish lira, or TRY. Its value has been shifting like crazy in the last few years. 10 years ago, I remember it was around $1 for 2.5 Turkish lira. Right now, in 2025, $1 is worth 40 Turkish lira. And if you're watching this video in a few years, chances are that'll be even higher. Now, how can you pay in Istanbul? Well, it's like in Greece. Most places take credit cards, but when paying small amounts, in tourist shops, for instance, they might only want to take cash. Now, because the local currency is continuously dropping, most shops are very happy if you pay in cash with dollars or euros, because these are much more trustworthy currencies. So don't rush to get your Turkish liras as soon as you're entering Turkey. You might be fine using your own money. And by the way, know that Turkey is a pretty expensive country. They've had some crazy inflation the last few years, and compared to Athens, Istanbul is currently around twice as pricey. So while a restaurant in Athens will cost you around 25 euros per person, it can easily be 50 euros in Istanbul. So be ready to spend a bit more there than in Greece. Now, how about internet? How can you have data on your phone when walking around Istanbul? Well, as for Greece, my recommendation would be to use an eSIM, which is basically an app that behaves like a physical SIM card. The forfeit I took was $10 for 3 gigs, and it was plenty enough for the 1 week I was there. So if you're there for 1 day, it's definitely enough as well. I'm gonna leave the link to book such an eSIM down below. Something else, be careful, tap water is not drinkable in Istanbul, unlike in Athens, so you will have to buy water bottles. Now, very important, how do you get around the city? Well, public transport is very decent, but taxis are so affordable, around $10, $15 for an average ride, that I would just stick to that. And they have Uber in Turkey as well. I was constantly using the app and I always had a cab showing up super fast. Now, a few words regarding the cruise port, because I know many people who visit Istanbul are on a cruise. So here you go. The cruise port is called GalataPort and is located here, 20 minutes on foot or 5 minutes by taxi from Taksim, so the new city center, and 45 minutes on foot or 15 minutes by taxi from Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque. It's a brand new cruise port. It was finished in 2022, and it feels a bit like a mall. There's plenty of clothing stores, bars, restaurants, free restrooms, obviously, and so on. Now, to get a taxi from there, you have to exit the cruise port through one of the many exits, and there you should find some taxis lined up ready to be used. If not, just call an Uber. As I said, they're very responsive. Now, what do I recommend you do in Istanbul, especially if you only have one day? Well, in my eyes, either you go on a historical tour visiting the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque, or you go on a food tour, knowing that Turkish food is significantly different from Greek food, so there's still a lot to be discovered there, even if you've already gone on one or multiple food tours in Greece. Now, of course, if you're staying for multiple days in Istanbul, by all means, you should go to both these tours, but if you're on a cruise ship, you won't have enough time for all of that, so you gotta choose. And I'm gonna show you now an overview of both these tours in order for you to decide what you're most drawn to. Let's start with the historical tour. It's a guided walking tour of the two most iconic landmarks of Istanbul, namely the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque. The Hagia Sophia, which means the Holy Wisdom in Greek, was built in the 6th century after Christ, back when Istanbul was still called Constantinople and was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. And just so you know, the Hagia Sophia remained the largest, tallest, biggest Christian church in the whole world for over 1,000 years, until the St. Peter Basilica was built in Vatican City 500 years ago. So yeah, the Hagia Sophia is a big deal for Christianity. Now, since Constantinople was conquered by the Ottoman Empire in 1453, obviously the Hagia Sophia was converted to Islam and became a mosque, which it still is now, and that's why you can see these 4 minarets around the building. A minaret, in case you don't know, is a tower at the top of which a worshipper called muezzin announces the beginning of the prayer 5 times per day. Now, since Islam forbids any representation of living beings inside a mosque, all the Christian frescoes and mosaics that once decorated the walls of the Hagia Sophia were covered with plaster approximately 600 years ago, and then painted over with this yellow color you see here. But in 1931, the brand new Republic of Turkey, so no longer the Ottoman Empire, decided to close the Hagia Sophia for prayer and to transform the building into a historical monument. And so the plaster layer started being removed, and amazing mosaics were suddenly revealed. It's insane to imagine that all of these were made 1,000, maybe even 1,500 years ago. The problem, however, is that in 2020, Erdogan, Turkey's current president, declared the Hagia Sophia a mosque once again. And that means that the historical work of slowly unveiling all of these mosaics was stopped. Of course, I'm saying it's a problem because I'm looking at it from a historian's perspective. But I'm sure some Turks are over the moon to be allowed once again to pray inside that gorgeous building. But still, for me, I would have liked, of course, to be able to discover more of these mosaics. So what does this mean for you as a visitor? Well, the ground floor is for prayer only, and so it's no longer accessible to tourists. You will directly go to the upper floor, but no worries, you can still see the whole thing pretty well from up there, so you're not missing out. And fun fact, you see these white drapes? What are they doing there exactly? Well, they're hiding this mosaic of the Holy Virgin with baby Jesus in her arms, because since it's an active mosque again, well, they have to hide it now. So yeah, as you can see, the Hagia Sophia has a very interesting and crazy story, and there's even more, much more to be said about it, and that's why I really think you should go on this guided tour instead of doing it on your own. The other building that this tour will be covering is the Blue Mosque. Now, this one is much more straightforward. It was built by Sultan Ahmed in the early 1600s, and it's one of the largest, most beautiful mosques in town. And it's called the Blue Mosque because of all these blue tiles decorating the inside of the building. Now, don't be surprised, you will be asked to remove your shoes before entering. That's because at the Blue Mosque, you are allowed to enter the ground floor, and since that's the active praying area, no shoes allowed as per Muslim tradition. And speaking of dress code, for both buildings, so the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque, no shorts, no visible shoulders, and women need to cover their hair with a scarf. So bring a scarf. Now, where can you book this tour I just showed? Well, you can scan this or click the link down below. It's a 3-hour tour and you have the option to be picked up directly at the cruise port as well. So if you're on a cruise, super convenient. And everything is included. You don't have to buy entrance tickets separately either. Now, in case you want to visit these two buildings on your own, which I don't really recommend, but you might have your reasons. The Blue Mosque is free, so you don't have to book anything for that. But the entrance to the Hagia Sophia, for that you need a ticket. And it's the same story as for the Acropolis in Athens. You might have to line up for ages to get your paper ticket, but you can skip all of that by getting your ticket online, and here's the link for that, or down below. All right, this was for the historical tour. Now, what if you're a huge foodie and you'd like to discover what Turkish cuisine looks like? Because yeah, even though I feel like Turkey is not that famous on the international scene for its food, that's a bit unfair in my opinion, because they have some really delicious stuff. It's somewhere between Greek food and Armenian food, which makes sense since that's exactly where Turkey is located on the world map. So this food tour will start at 10 a.m. here in the very north of the old town. That's half an hour on foot or 10 minutes by taxi from the cruise port. You're going to start with a Turkish breakfast, which in case you didn't know is a big thing in Turkey. There's 1 billion tiny bowls on the table. Some of it is sweet, some of it is savory, and combining all these different flavors is a wonderful experience. After that, you're gonna have a small walk through the multiple bazaars that Istanbul is famous for. So you'll get to see all these lantern shops, all the spices, the olives, butcher shops. It's a very scenic part of town. I really like it. After that, you'll see a few mosques as well, because yeah, this tour is not just about food, it's also a walking tour of the city, and the guide will take some time to talk about the city's history and culture as well. After that, time to hop on a boat to go to the Asian side of the map. Because yeah, don't forget, Istanbul is built on both sides of the Bosphorus Strait, so both in Europe and in Asia. And while the European side has the old town and the new city center, the Asian part of town is mostly famous for having the best food. So if you're going on a food tour, it definitely makes sense to also go and say hi to the Asian side. Crossing the Bosphorus will take around 20 minutes, and it's a great opportunity to have a look at all the famous landmarks of the city from afar. That's Galata Tower, for instance, built as a watchtower in the 1300s. And over there, you can see the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia, which we talked about earlier. Beautiful stuff. Once you get to the Asian side, the first stop will be for some Turkish coffee. And in case you're wondering, yes, it's pretty much the exact same thing as what we call Greek coffee. So don't try to spot the differences. There are no differences. Next, you'll taste the famous lahmacun, which is something like pizza with a very thin crust and minced meat on top with lots of Middle Eastern spices. And traditionally, with meat dishes, you're gonna drink ayran in Turkey, which is something like salty yogurt, a bit like kefir, in case you know it. Next up, mussels. Mussels are a very traditional delicacy in Istanbul, since there are plenty of mussels growing wild in the Bosphorus Strait. They're stuffed with rice and then cooked in this broth you see here. Very tasty. The next stop will be the super famous Iskender kebab, which is grilled lamb on top of pita bread, and then they pour this melted butter on top of the whole thing. This is probably going to be your favorite dish of the entire tour, and it's probably also the unhealthiest one. After that, time to hop back on the boat and head again to the European side, where there's going to be 2 more stops. The first one will be the very traditional Istanbul fish wrap. Very simple, yet very tasty. And then the desserts, of course, with the main highlight for me being the künefe, which is cheese, a bit like mozzarella, coated with kadaifi, which is shredded phyllo dough mixed with butter, and then topped with ground pistachios and some sugar syrup. Künefe is by far my favorite dessert in the whole world. You'll see it's to die for. So there you go. That's the food tour, and you can book it here or down below. And as always, if when clicking on the link you see multiple tours appear, the first one at the top is the one I'm talking about. Now, since this tour starts at 10 in the morning and finishes at 4, that might leave you with just enough time to also go and see the Hagia Sophia and or the Blue Mosque on your own, and then quickly head back to the cruise port. So, you know, that's also an option you can keep in mind. All right, if you're going to Istanbul, you might also be going to Kuşadası, so the cruise port near the archaeological site of Ephesus. If that's the case, I'm working on a video, which I will put here when it's ready, with everything you need to know about visiting Ephesus. And if your cruise is going to Katakolo as well, close to Olympia, then definitely check out this one. And there you go. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. See you in the next one. Bye.